is good.
Perfect. So you're recording already. Okay.
And we are live. Welcome, Yeugenia. Fireside Gathering number 14. It's my pleasure to invite and welcome you to be a part of this call. Yeugenia is a...
Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're a 5'2" heretic hermit, and you're also a self-projected projector. So
yes, I am.
You are, and we're gonna explore lots of things here. You have 3 defined channels. You have the left angle cross of masks, and you also, I believe, have we have an interesting story to explore about how you came from Moscow, Russia, to where you are now. So,
yes, absolutely. I'm just going to close the door. I apologize. I should have
no problem. No problem at all. So just while you're doing that, I wanted to mention one thing, which is that 5'2" profile is one of the less common profiles that we have in human design. There are 12 different profiles, and when the difference of the 2 numbers is 3, they're much less common because of the way the incarnation cross lines up. So it's great that we get to explore that. And hi.
I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that it's one of the less common profiles. I read about the difference, but less different than 3, but I didn't know it was a less common profile. So
yeah, we can start there if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be
absolutely
great? So one thing you can do is if anyone's watching this and they're like wondering, am I one of the more common profiles or the less common profiles? If you go to the statistics page of Jovian Archive, you just search for stats and Jovian Archive, you see a bar chart, and it's basically, so it'll have 1-3 profile is one of the more common ones, and then it will have 1-4, and then it will have the next one is 2-4, and then it will have 2-5. So they're like, the more common ones, they're roughly about 6 times as frequent as the less common profiles. So you've got one of those. And if as we're talking about profile, we're going to get onto some of the kind of the juicy stuff in your story. But while we're here, let's talk about profiles. And you may be aware of this. Have you seen that model of the house where there's the 3 floors on the bottom and the 3 floors at the top? So we've got the lower trigram and the upper trigram, and so the 5th line is halfway up it's the middle of the upper trigram, and the 2 is the middle of the lower trigram. And what's really interesting for me about this 5'2" profile, I'll share this. We normally do it the other way around, but I'll share this and let me know then how you find it resonates, or if you've got some examples.
Of course. Yeah.
So because it starts in the upper trigram, it's a left angle cross. So that means that it's transpersonal karma. It's about interactions with others. And but the 5th line is interesting because I'm a 3-5, so I know a little about the 5th line, but I have it the other way around in my unconscious. So for you, it's your conscious is the 5th line. And the 5th line is really like, when I first read about it, it was all about our projections. People see what they need to see or what they want to see. Raluca, you're a 5th line as well, aren't you? You're a 5'2".
Raluca is a 5'2" as well, so she could definitely participate in this. I remember hearing Raluca talking about some of the things, so I can definitely relate.
I got you like one on each side here on my screen.
Okay.
That'd be actually fascinating to hear, because I know Raluca has been very aware and living her design, so I'm definitely curious.
Yeah, super. So okay, so the initial thing is about the projections, is like, it's the heretic. It's like, people can think you're amazing, wow, and it's nothing to do with you. They're seeing what they see. Now you might be amazing, but it's kind of like you're up there and they see all of that. And then, you know, you carry on doing your thing, and then maybe you do something that wasn't what they expected, or they didn't like it, and then they think you're terrible, you know, and it's kind of, none of it is anything to do with you as a fifth line. So it carries these projections. And I sort of read that to start with, and I thought, well, you know, this doesn't sound like much fun. You know, if you're a fifth line, you've got to constantly like dodge these projections or ignore these projections. And like, you know, they're all coming at you all the time, anytime anyone's seeing you. But then I looked a bit deeper, and it's a very charismatic profile. You know, this line is very charismatic because it's really about your talent, your skill in influencing other people. So there's a real talent to this line, which is about a capacity to influence other people. And, you know, charisma is one word for it. Now, then we go to the second line. And what's really interesting about the second line, it's also about talent, but it's much more about talent in a very private way. It's the image of the artist who's, you know, in there doing their art. They're not doing their art because they want to influence other people. They're not doing their art because, you know, someone told them to, or their friends like it, or they're doing, you know, it's the hermit is away on their own in private, just doing the thing that they love to do. Now, art for some people could be painting. For some people, it could be building a business. For some people, it could be, you know, it could be anything. But it's that creative expression in private. And again, it's the talent. So these less common profiles have this harmonic between, you know, it's the same position in the lower trigram and the upper trigram. So 2 and 5s, obviously you've got 5, 2, it's the same position. So I've heard them described as acting as a bridge for the other profiles, and that's still something that I'm exploring. So it's the talent in the kind of the public arena, and it's the talent then in your private space. So how does that land for you guys? Like, Yeugenia, does that resonate for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think everything that I've been building up to in my life now, in my 40s, is sort of now coming forward. So it's interesting that, you know, I've been studying human design and living it for the last couple of years. So I've become a lot more aware of the projection side of things and how people project onto me. And I used to really take it personally. Now that I'm a lot more aware that it's not me, it's just the mechanics, it's become a lot easier to deal with. And at times I can even feel how people are projecting onto me all this, first of all, expectations, but then also whatever they're feeling inside. And if that's something very positive, then, you know, they're just loving me and eating me up. But if it's something very, you know, negative, then I physically and energetically started feeling it now. So I try to not avoid it, but in those circumstances, it's obviously not a good place to be, since I'm also a self-projector. So I feel something energetically where it's kind of like not the right energy, not the right place to be. So it's an interesting thing. It's become a very interesting thing. The more I'm aware of it, the more it's showing up, I think, or just because I'm seeing it, I'm obviously way more aware of it. Or because I'm more aware of it, I'm seeing it. All of those things, all of the above.
Root, maybe.
Exactly. So it's very interesting. Now, I've also realized with the talents, I think, you know, coming from Russia, there's a lot of conditioning. I mean, not just having been raised in an Eastern European country, but I think it's a combination of, you know, the country, the regime, the upbringing, all of these things have definitely played a big part. And I've been aware of my conditioning over the years. Human design has really helped me to start shedding it. I think it's become a lot more of a radical thing. I think it's a combination of my age, the place I'm in, and human design that all sort of collided together and was a perfect timing to start, you know, as I call it, undressing the deconditioning, because it's like clothes, right? It takes time, and the more you do it, the more you realize all these deep parts where the clothes has become part of the skin for some of us, or for myself as well.
Mm-hmm. It's such an interesting thing you say about the clothes. When I I resonate with it so strongly, because I used to teach swimming when I was in Australia, and we had a little sort of get to know each other session where people would sit down and then, you know, say where they were at and what they wanted. And then everyone would put their swimsuits on and go swimming. And it was so interesting because when they first sat around the table, you'd have this guy, Bruce, who was maybe like a carpenter or something, and he was dressed that way. You'd have this guy, Joe, who was a lawyer, and he was sort of came like in his casual sort of, and people had their identities. You could really clearly see it with the clothes. And then once everyone took off their clothes and was in their swimsuit in the swimming pool, it's so like, I think as a projector, do you find this, you can sort of see other people in different ways? They've like taken off some of those clothes and you can really see who they are rather than the role they play with the clothes. So
yes. And I also think that the clothes that we put on, it does create that identity, right? So like today, you know, I felt like dressing up, and it's a slightly more, you know, the sparkly side of me. I don't know how to say it, but it's the clothes does influence us that way as well. But I think you're right. It's when we are sort of naked or almost that, we are all equal, like in the dressing room, right?
Another series of interviews, but
but I did think about it in the dressing room, like in the gym, right? When you look around and you see all kinds of women, all shapes and sizes, for example, and you know, and some of them are professionals, some of them are housewives. It doesn't matter. We're all sort of this. It's kind of like an equalizer, right? We're there at the same level. And it's interesting to see how also people feel themselves. I've always had that, you know, thing about watching people when they're not dressed, and how some people are very comfortable to present themselves and others need to be closed for others to see them. So I think it's part of what you're talking about. It's kind of that level of comfort, right, with yourself and with others seeing you without your clothes, but the clothes could be a lot of things.
Well, you do have the left angle cross of masks, don't you? So that's very interesting. And I just listening to you, I kind of feel like it's sort of a game to play for you. It's kind of like, you know, because it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you're, like you're saying, if some women are very comfortable, or some humans are very comfortable being naked and others less so. And, you know, I've encountered women who didn't want to be seen without their makeup on. You know, they wouldn't want even a lover or their partner to see them before they put on the mask of the makeup. And I get what it seems quite playful when I hear you talk about it. It seems like it's something you have fun with. Today I'm going to put on this outfit. Today I'm, you know, and it's but it is in the description of the hermit. Is, have you read that one where it's like, you know, you're there in your room, you're doing your art, you're painting, and it's you know, it's the ground floor of the house. Now people can look in, but you're not aware of those people looking in. You're just doing your art, and then it gets dark, and you turn on the light to keep painting, and then all of a sudden people looking in see that you're naked, and there's this sudden like shock of like, oh my God, I'm naked and people are looking at me, and it wasn't the point at all. You were just doing your thing, you know. So but you work with women, don't you? So this is part of your professional work too, right?
It is. So I've started, I have 2 daughters and I have 2 stepdaughters. So working with women has been a big thing for me. And as a woman myself who has experienced different things, and I work with the voice too. So being able for women to be able to speak up about who they are, what they're here for, and be able to find their voice as their footprint in this world. That's the work that I do. So it's been a journey, and what I find resonates for me is what you've done in your last video, I think, where you talked about see and be seen. I think, you know, the more we do our own work, the more it becomes evident, you know, how we can help others. So things sort of open up for ourselves. But when we're doing it in service, we're not letting our ego drive us. We're just taking our experience, taking what we know. It really takes us to a place where we can really be of service, and we can be recognized as well, because we have that something, right? We have that magic that we can share with others. And I think the more we do our own work, and I think as projectors, I know, you know, you've talked about, and it's talked about a lot, that we're here about the other. But I think without understanding who we are too, through the other and through working out some of the kinks of the, the gremlins, the blockages. I think it's really hard to get to that place, and it's really then hard to help the other, because who are we to tell the other, what to guide them if we're not able to guide ourselves?
It's such a
I don't know if
powerful
that makes
thing, isn't it? It totally makes sense to me. And this thing about how as projectors, we have one of the most difficult deconditioning journeys to take.
Absolutely.
So maybe that would be a nice way to do this. Maybe we could talk first about, we both got this channel of structuring, haven't we? So maybe we could, there's 23.
I know we've been all over the place, and it's my fault a little bit, just because things come up. And when I thought about this, I didn't want to prepare, because as a self-projected projector, I am more authentic when I show up, just sort of having thought about it, but not prepared, right? So I want it to be here. And I think it's a lot more value for others when I'm just here as, present versus kind of, rehearsed stuff or something that I've been thinking about saying.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because but this channel of structuring, it's for me, it's a very organic thing. But I'm doing some decluttering here, and it's not like the mind thinks how it's all going to be. It kind of is like, like just the order emerging from the chaos is kind of, and that seems to be how most of my videos roll. And we've got you here who has this G center connected to the throat, which is fun. It's juicy. We don't know. It's unpredictable. Who knows what's going to come out. So, but I love this. I love this. We could look at some of the conditioning forces and your journey of moving from one continent to another and the deconditioning, and then we could talk about how you serve other people and because I think it is important to be patient as a projector, and I feel we see projectors coming in from all different sort of angles, and some people are like yourself in service to others. Others are, right in the middle of the deconditioning process, and they're maybe have created a life for themselves where they don't have to, go to work every day, and they've just got lots of space. And then others are coming in, they're just like, maybe they've got a corporate job, 9 to 5, working as a generator, and still, just saying, oh my God, I'm a projector. I shouldn't really be doing this. What do I do? So how was it growing up you grew up in communist Russia? Yeah. You were born in the early 70s, right?
Yes.
Same kind of age as me. And so what was that actually like? Because Russia seems so different to me as a place, even now.
Well, I think, looking back at my childhood, I definitely think that I've had a pretty amazing childhood. And I know, that's not maybe what people expect to hear. I think first of all, I was very lucky to be born into a family where both of my parents were very cosmopolitan people. They were educated. They were both a little bit older when they had us, so they've had quite a bit of life experience. They were both interested in life and very positive people, and they're still together to this day. Thank God, they're still there and still positive and carrying sort of that light. So that was an amazing example for me growing up. What was a struggle for me, and this is more my family, is that because I was different, I was very particular about certain things. I don't know if it's channel of structuring or something else. I've had this thing about, this is mine, don't touch my stuff. I think it also has to do with the society where you're not, kind of your opinion does not count as much. It's the collective that is more important. So you kind of feel like one of many. So it's hard to stand out. It's hard to be individual, because being individual can be punished, but also is not praised, as it is today, for example, how kids are being raised today. Oh, you're individual, you're this, you're amazing, let's just praise, rah, 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 how, you're showing, oh, you put a picture together, you've drawn something, a couple of scribbles, oh, honey, you're so creative. Like, none of that was happening, right? It was all around, you got to sort of serve the collective. That was the kind of the overall theme everywhere you go, daycare, school, and so on. So as far as my family, I felt supported, but I also felt laughed at by my family a lot, because I have an older sister who is very different. As it turns out, my sister is manifesting generator. We've had, and obviously I found out only within the last 2 years, and I couldn't understand, we have grown up in the same family, but we're night and day different. And the way we approach things, the way we've lived our life, So it's been interesting because my sister was the older one and also the one that was the exemplary child. She just had that, you know, at school, everything, because I was always behind her, 3 years behind. So I'm not good enough, you know, you're not as good as your sister. And I watched my sister and she's amazing. I just never wanted to be like her. So, you know, I've sort of always kind of carved out my journey, but it was hard because, well, what would I say? So I think it's a combination of things. When you stick out, you feel like it's like that whack-a-mole game, you know, that game that, you know, as soon as you stick your head out, somebody, you know, kind of
whack-a-mole with a mole pops up.
Whack-a-mole, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Somebody, you know, so you
That's
kind of
tough.
learn that.
I mean, we also call it
Yeah,
tall poppy syndrome, right? Where you've got the field
yeah.
of poppies and this one sticking up has a risk of being cut down because it's different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know,
Whack-a-mole, I like
there were certain things emerging, I think, when I was young, but all of them were shut down. I think all of them. Like, honestly, my parents were very educated. So education, like getting an education, higher education was very important. So if I said to my parents that I wanted to be an artist, for example, it's just a no-go. Like I'd be like, just basically, my family would just disown me and would not know anything. Wouldn't want to have anything to do with me. So, and not because they're bad people. It's just that, you know, for my own good, they'd want me to be, you know, education was everything, which is amazing because they're both well-read and well-educated. I think that pressure, though, is kind of something that, you know, you learn. So I was very conditioned. I wanted to be a doctor, and during my high school years, because my grandmother was a doctor, and I felt like that made the family happy. So I thought I'm going to be respected. I always wanted, since I was a very young kid, I wanted to be, I think I used the word respected, but I think it's actually meant recognized. So since I was about 4 or 5 years old, my dad would tell me that I would talk to him about, you know, I want to learn to do this. I want to learn to drive a car. I want to learn, you know, I want to be respected. But I think what it meant really is recognized when I was growing up. So I was always eager to learn, for sure. But I think because I was judged quite a bit, it was always a journey of, and I felt the judgment was harsh, because there were teachers who would say that I'm very capable, but I'm not trying. And there'd be others who would say she's absolutely incapable. And there were others, there was only one, I would say, who I'm still in touch with. She was one of the most toughest teachers of the whole school, because I went to the same school from grade 1 to grade 11, which means like all the way to high school. And she said that she has so much capability, even though she was tough on me, but she always respected me and recognized something within me, which as a child, and since I was a child, I've always been that way. I always felt that from others, and I felt I respect everything and everybody, no matter where you come from, as long as you're respectful to me. If you become disrespectful, I will ignore you. But since I was a child, there was that feeling. And it's not a very Russian...
You felt really seen by that teacher, right? That feels like she saw you somehow.
Yes, and I felt very seen by a few other teachers. Let's say I have ability for languages, so that was where I excelled in. So languages, I felt very seen and very recognized, and English has become, you know, something that has taken me forward to other countries, given me a lot of opportunities where I was recognized, because I worked as a translator since I was a very, very young girl. Growing up in Russia, and I got a chance to travel and see the world and meet a lot of famous politicians and celebrities, and because I got a chance to do that since I was young.
Okay, this is super cool. So so one of the things here that, like, there's a theme been emerging in the last few weeks about how, you know, there's certain things that happen in the world that are a bit crazy. That, you know, and this sort of education system is one of them. This whole thing of and I'm just so curious about. I get this feeling like, you know, this thing of like, why are we here as projectors? And I really feel like we're here to maybe see that there's a different way of doing things, see how crazy things that we lived through were, and we're invited, we can guide other people to do things in a different way. So the schooling system is something that I'm so interested in. Like, how could we do it in a way that's optimal for the humans coming through, that's the best for them? And I used to be a teacher and a Steiner teacher, but this thing about, you know, this kid has so much potential, but they're not. It's so interesting, isn't it, how teachers put that on the kid? You know, this kid has so much potential, but they're not applying themselves, right? Now that's like a cliched phrase that must get written on a lot of report cards. And, you know, you look at that and you think, well, hang on a minute, this is a little kid being themselves, and you're the teacher. Isn't it your job as the teacher to find a way that that kid can express their potential? And especially as a self-projected projector, I mean, how deeply have you dived into it? Because for me, it's like, it's a totally different type of projector. It's almost like a species within a species, you know, being self-projected. And it's so individual, you know, it's so like, I mean, you do have two collective channels, but the G center, it's like, it's not there to be controlled and do what it's supposed to do, you know, and it's connected to the throat. So who knows what's going to come out? That for me is one of the delightful things about all of the, and we've got Ron on the call as well. And I know a few self-projected projectors, and you guys are just like, you know, when I talk, it's kind of logical. And I also have other stuff lower down, but I've got the ajna connected to the throat. It's a bit dry. Whereas the creativity that comes out when self-projected projectors are communicating their truth is fascinating. And yeah, I just think like we could do so much better with education. I really feel like us projectors have a real role to play in that. But I'm actually right now really interested in this story about translating, and how did you get into it? How did you, obviously then that was a road to travel and meet people, interesting, famous people. And then was that what took you away from Russia? Like, could you tell us the story of the translation part?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I guess it was also living in the time where everything was discombobulating, or, you know, the country was falling apart, the regime was falling apart. It was a very interesting time to grow up in, where I think it had something to do, for me, seeing that, sort of having been raised up until a certain age, let's say grade 7 or grade 8, with certain values, you know, being the pioneer, and then, you know, Komsomol, which is like the sort of the second level of the pioneer before you become the member of the Communist Party. So it's kind of like the junior Communist Party. And having felt the, like, I did not really feel the inclination to do it, but it felt like the right thing to do. And everything about this people, the pioneer, I like to uphold, because I'm big on standards, right? And upholding yourself to very high standards. So there was something about the pioneer when I was sort of chosen to be it. To me, it wasn't about the ego. It was more about, like, you know, I have been upheld to set certain standards that somebody has recognized that I've been upholding my standards. Now, becoming sort of the youth leader of the pre-communist party, it was something that I felt I didn't like any of those people, because they were all about, you know, they were all brown nosers to me. So they were so inauthentic, but I felt the need to do it because I was sort of pushed. Anyway, so that has nothing to do with the translator story. The country was falling apart. And, you know, I was a part of a school, which was one of the really schools that was quite international. We've had a principal. Again, I was very fortunate to be a part of the group of people who were very interesting and interested in life, and were not your standard kind of cut, your standard cut person in the communist regime. They all lived outside the box. And I happened to be around these people who were amazing individuals. I mean, they weren't perfect, but, you know, the principal of my school, let's say, he himself has is Italian, who came to Russia. His parents came to Russia and became communists. So he's had sort of a very interesting and very colorful upbringing. And by colorful, I mean, you know, you have all these different textures of cultures. And having grown up in Italy and having come to Russia and then lived through the war, and then he somehow managed to be himself and be an amazing teacher and a principal and build the school in the regime, but that the school acted totally not how it was supposed to. So he was allowed to be outside the box. Somehow he managed to make it work. He was very connected. And so we've had amazing teachers, but we also had a lot of foreigners coming, delegations. And when the country started to open up, we've had a number of exchanges with the schools in the US. And there was also a peace committee, a Soviet peace committee. A Soviet peace committee was something that I was introduced to through my parents' friends. And because I spoke the language, they said, you know, we have different projects. Do you want to volunteer? And I said, yes, I would love to do it, because it gave me I've always craved adventure. I've always liked to travel. I felt that. And, I've traveled throughout the country, but didn't get a chance to go anywhere else. The country was really closed. And this gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of people. That's how it started. So being a part of all these different delegations that were coming to Russia, to Moscow, to see the country, to talk about politics, to talk about youth uniting. So I happened to be right in the epicenter at the time, the epicenter of all of that happening. So that was pretty amazing. And so as being a translator, I felt very recognized because, my English was not perfect, but it was really good for my age. So I started when I was about 14. And then we happened to be on an exchange. My mom and I were chosen to be a part of this exchange of mothers and daughters for nuclear disarmament. So we happened to be on this exchange where a group of American women with their kids came to Russia, and we were invited to go back. So I was 14 years old when we hosted that group of kids with their mothers. And we were invited to go and visit and tour around the country, and we were treated like royalty. And go to the White House and go to the Congress and the Library of Congress and be in the news, in the journals and the magazines and every headline of every newspaper. We were there. And because I was one of the few kids in the group who actually enjoyed having the attention on me, and I was old enough and I spoke the language, I was chosen very often by these journalists or the reporters to be interviewed and asked about my life. So I felt very recognized. It was quite an interesting thing. And sometimes it felt like too much, just because that hermit, I think part of me was kind of like, enough. There was a lot of cameras, when we'd arrive into the airport and you'd be surrounded by these reporters. And, let's think about it. This is 1989. The country's just opening up. Reagan is in power. There's a lot of things happening. Now looking back, I'm realizing just what was happening. I'm telling you this, I've got shivers, because now looking back at some of the chronicles from those days, what was happening in the world, right? And how US was seeing this, and how we were seen as an enemy, right? And we saw US as an enemy, even though when I was growing up, my father, I would come home from school and I would talk about certain things that I've learned in school. And in grade 3, and I think it's very powerful. That's why I want to mention it here. I think in grade 3, we learned about these pioneers and the hero pioneers, kids from the revolution or from the days of the Second World War. And we were so brainwashed, right? So I came home and I'm telling my dad about this hero pioneer who has given us his family into the Communist Party, because they were hiding 2 cows, and how the party rewarded him for it. And but his grandfather killed the kid because he basically gave in his whole family. So the whole family was killed. Wow. And so he is celebrated as a hero for giving in his whole family and being sort of the member, doing the right thing. So I came home and I'm telling my father about this story. And my father looks at me, and I think, he didn't want to make it sort of like, what they're telling you in school is wrong. But he asked me a question. He said, he gave in his whole family. He betrayed his whole family. Is he really a hero? That's all he said. Or, what kind of a hero is he? So, but it wasn't said in a judgmental way. It's like he just left it with me. And I remember that I was kind of left with this thought, and I thought about it, and it really started. So what I started doing with his question is that, and he was very smart to not tell me, again, just leave it with me and let me sort of ponder it. And what I realized is that, I had to think for myself a little bit. And I don't think I shared that with my parents, and maybe it wasn't super aware, but there was something where I started to filter things through my own sort of that G center, I guess. And I also remember that at the end of school, when we were graduating, my principal said to us one thing. Oh, he said a lot of things, but one thing that I remember is he said, you're going to go out into the world and you're going to hear a lot and learn a lot. And I want to encourage you to do one thing, is to filter everything through your own consciousness, through your own awareness, and make decisions for yourself, which was a very powerful thing to say to kids who have been raised sort of in this turmoil, right? In a way, like sort of in the regime and the. Yeah. So I think I was lucky. I also probably, needed that encouragement as well to start thinking for myself, which has been a process. which has been a
Yeah.
process. So, but that's how I came into the translation. And then after that, I was invited to work with this group of musicians from England, actually the Purcell School of Music in London, which is a well-known school. I think Julian Lennon, the son of John Lennon, went there, and it was a very fascinating experience. I love music. I'm not fully a musician, but I just love music. So I happened to connect with this group. I was invited to go back and spend time with them. So, and then, I went to the States. We were very connected to sort of this group of people who came from Mississippi, out of all places, and my sister ended up there. So there's been all these things, like one sort of following the other, which has really allowed me to shine and to be recognized. And then I ended up in this political conference where I've met quite a few politicians. I mean, they're probably not well known here, but these are people, and women specifically, very strong women who have been at the forefront of this, the freedom movement and peace movement. And these are people who have lived through the repressions in Russia and the concentration camps. So I've been very, very fortunate to be a part of that. And then, when the film Stalin was being filmed in Russia, the movie Stalin with Robert Duvall, I was supposed to be working with them 24 hours a day with Robert Duvall. So I met him at the airport. He was an amazing human being, honestly, very humble and an absolutely wonderful man. And his manager, who was maybe not so wonderful, but I got a glimpse into this man, into this life, and I was going to start working with them. And there I realized, and that's the projector, the fifth line, right? Because they said to me, I was, I don't even know if I was 17 years old at the time, but I just felt such pressure because basically he needed a translator with him 24 hours a day. So you had to, he lived in the Stalin's dacha, which is a whole other experience. It's a haunted place because Stalin was just a horrible human being. It's a haunted place. So he wanted to live into the character. And I just realized that I cannot do it. And I think it's a good thing. I think it would have been, something would have happened where, I would have been burnt at the stake as a heretic. It's just that it was too much to take on. So I'm glad that at 17 or, a little bit younger than 17, I just said, as much as, he is this amazing human being, and to say that I worked with Robert Duvall for all these years or whatever, not years, but for whatever, 3 weeks, 4 weeks that he was there, I think it would have been a little bit too much. So I'm glad that I sort of eventually said no.
So you were 17 and you had the opportunity. It's crazy. You had this amazing opportunity, but it would have involved going and living in a place where you didn't feel good about the place. You didn't feel good about the intensity of it. Like when you look back at that through the lens of human design, you've got all those open centers under the G. You're totally open in the emotional center. How does that, do you have a deeper understanding looking back at that through this lens of human design?
I think I have a deeper understanding of, not knowing when enough is enough now. I mean, if I tell you, and we'll go probably, I'll share a little bit of my life. I mean, I lived, I've been a single mom for many years. I've worked 2 jobs, not just one, to support my kids and myself. So I've lived a super generator life for sure. And I totally know what it's like. And, if my life looks any glamorous now to anybody, I've lived a lot of things. So a lot of ups and downs. And the point is that looking back on that, I think it was something within me where I realized I was being taken advantage of. And not by Robert Duvall, but the people who arranged and made an arrangement, I realized that there was integrity lacking in that. So in what I was supposed to be, what I was told I would be doing, and what it turned out that I would be doing, as in like, being basically like a slave. And I don't mean it in a sense of the word, not having sort of my own say, but just being sort of this, as a translator, it's a hard job. And when somebody asked me, would you like to do this job for the rest of your life? I said, no way, Jose, no way I'm doing this, because you're always translating for somebody else. So none of your opinions ever count.
Right.
So it's kind of fascinating. You're looked at as the help, right? And sure. I have to say, there's, it's okay every once in a while, but no, it's not happening in my life. I have a lot of things to say for myself. So something when I was young, I just realized, no, it's just not happening. I'm not. But with the Robert Duvall situation, I think it's more with sort of going there. It's a combination of things, of being present and not belonging to yourself, and sort of realizing that for this crappy pay, which is, is not really about the pay, but, you do want to be but you're going to be basically not belonging. Your time does not belong to you at all. And I didn't like his manager. There was just something about the guy that was a bit creepy, you know, the Me Too movement part kind of thing, where, you know, at 17, I just, there were just certain things that I was very aware of in my life. And I grew up very quickly because I've been around a lot of older people. So I just knew, you know, where I'm going to step in and where I just need to trust myself. I didn't want to sort of just say, oh, not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's kind of the theme here is like, it's kind of like, it sounds good, it looks good. In some ways, you're being seen as a talented young woman at that time who has a lot to give. But it's really about, it sounds like it's more about, they're not, that deeper down, it's not about you, is it? It's about, you know, what can be, what you can do for them, how you can serve their agenda. And
absolutely,
as a translator, it's such an interesting point you made, like so clear that, you know, as a self-projected projector, it's all about the expression of what's in you coming out and being spoken. So on the face of it, you get to talk a lot, you know, you get to move your mouth a lot if you're a translator, but it's not that you're not being asked to share what's coming out of you. It's like processing and you know, translating, isn't it? It's like not
and it's almost like you know, I don't know if you read anything in translation, like any poetry or any work, like any stories. Sometimes the translation is better. It can be better or worse than the actual piece of right.
So there is some creative influence.
Yes, and there's actually, you know, if you can play around, like there's been times where I would like sort of not know the words, and I'd have to be creative because, you know, in political conferences, sometimes, you know, these politicians, the way they speak, and, you know, my English was good, but not as sophisticated as it would be today. So there were certain things that you had to be creative. You can't say, I don't know. So you'd have to come up with explaining yourself differently, or just throw some of your own stuff in, just because this is part of life.
So
that part was fun. That part was fun.
Later.
Because you realize that you can actually, you know, I don't know if I've heard this story about a translator who was just saying his own thing. Whatever the guy was saying was not even being translated. So, you know, I could see myself doing that, but, you know, I don't know how long I'd last in a job like that.
I mean, I guess there's not many people in the room who can understand. If you're the translator, there's probably few people who can understand with the full understanding of what was one language and what was the other language. So you do. I can see you enjoyed that part.
It's interesting because I think what you realize is the power of language, first of all, and kind of the power of knowing what's going on. And I think if you play it good enough, like if you just know, if you have a straight face, you know, the poker face, you know, there's a lot of things that can happen. But sometimes it's like, you know, somebody is talking at you as a translator, right? And you're so bored that you just have to keep your focus, right? You have to keep your focus, and your mind, you know, sometimes starts drifting. And that's the part that I find, you know, that can be hard, because if you're not interested in what they're saying, but you have to be right on.
Yeah. I think that's so true with any job, isn't it? Like if you're like doing transcripting, or you have to prepare a meeting for someone, or get some documents together, like whatever those kind of support role is, or those roles is, you know, I suspect that you probably have a lot more awareness, you know, now than a lot of people do. But it'd be really interesting, wouldn't it? What if everybody who was in those support roles would only translate for someone whose vibe they felt, you know, they would only translate for someone they found interesting, or they would only, like, you know, be a secretary and type up notes for a boss that, you know, they found inspiring.
Yeah.
Or they would only want to cook for someone that actually really appreciated their food. And it'd be so interesting, wouldn't it? Like, because you get all the boring people, you have no one to help them and support them, no matter how much money they had. And the interesting people would get the people. And
yeah, you know what? The world would be a little bit upside down, because you'd probably, you know, or somebody who has the heart, right? Somebody who just brings that inspiration out in you. It's like somebody said the other day, I don't like to be served by the waiter in a restaurant who doesn't enjoy their job, because it translates into the taste of the meal and to my experience. And when you start becoming aware of it, it's so true. If we don't enjoy what we do or others, it shows through everything. And the cook who loves what they do, their food is so amazingly tasting. And somebody says, let me try this recipe. Well, honey, if you're not going to put all the love into it and the enjoyment, it's just whatever the ingredients you use, it's just not going to be the same.
The days of the angry, pissed off chef being the best chef are probably on their way out, huh? Let's hope.
And those chefs are, they have not lived a good life, or, they've gone, so many heart attacks, right? The most divorces, the most depression, drug addiction. Like, that's one of the very hard professions that people don't talk about.
Yeah. It's not an easy job, is it? Being behind the scenes, working those hours under that pressure to.
No, you have to really love it, I think.
To do that. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things about being a Steiner teacher, it was like there was a two-edged sword, because it was really about dedicating your life to that job, and there was something that was, it was kind of like, there was something beautiful about that, and a feeling like if it was true for you, you'd really be supported, you'd find strength to do it from places that you didn't know. But there was just something that for me, I just felt, well, if I'm going to be in front of kids and inspiring them, then I want to be inspiring them in a way that I have an amazing life, where I have abundance, I have expression, I'm fulfilled, that then the kids find me inspiring. And if I don't find my own life inspiring, and I feel like I'm in a prison, even if it's a prison which is worthwhile, or if it's like, it's such an interesting thing. And this was where I started, it got me questioning on, is school even a thing that we should be doing with kids? And I don't know, I'm not sure. But that's my stuff.
No, I'm with you on the fact that the teachers today, and we actually do work in high school we do this empowerment workshop once a year for grade 9 girls, because that's a big transition from grade 8 to grade 9. Okay. And I find that, first of all, I have totally different appreciation for teachers, because we go in and we teach for a week. So you realize the struggles that the teachers go through, especially in high school. I mean, they're all struggles and different points, I'm sure, but the high school ages, I think, are really, really hard and important. And what I realize is that the teachers who love what they do and who have a life that they enjoy, they present themselves differently. They react to the kids differently. They're just a different person there versus a miserable, somebody who hates what they're doing, doesn't like their life, and doesn't like the children, right? How can they inspire? You're absolutely right. I think it's all very, very connected.
I guess you can see that really clearly coming into a school, especially as a projector. You can see very clearly. I mean, but the kids can see it too, can't they? The kids can see so clearly what all the teachers that inspire them. Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit more about, because that sounds like a fun, I don't know if fun's the right word, but powerful, because you're going in, and is it something the girls the girls find inspiring or resist to?
Well, I take one of my daughters, because they went to this high school, so I'm very, I've been very involved, and I feel they've done a lot for my kids, so I wanted to give back. And this whole thing of empowering girls has been very, very important, because of myself not having necessarily that inspiration as a girl growing up. Not that my parents didn't do a good enough job, but I think, they were both busy and working, and it was a different time. So it's talking about the self-awareness and self-love, and it's talking about kind of how you can become your own leader, right? And so it's very interesting that when we go in, I guess you get sort of 60-40, 40%, maybe 30% of girls that are not interested. They're just in a different place. But I say, and my girls, both my daughters, who are both projectors, which is very interesting, as I found out, they're very different, night and day different though, very open in their design. I'm talking, they only have 2 centers defined. So they're even more open than I am. And each one of them, did 1 year with me, and the other one did the other year. And they both get very bitter, not frustrated, because that's a generator thing, but they get bitter in times when we don't have the appreciation, right? Or the recognition from these kids. And I say to them, I keep reminding them that when the 50 or the 60% that recognize us and that are kind of like, yes, thank you. And you can read it in their eyes that they've enjoyed the session, that, they're walking away with something, that they've gotten something out of it, I say to them, we're doing it for these kids. We're not doing it for the 30-40%. And it depends, sometimes it's 20%, because they're divided into smaller groups. So we do it in groups. I say we do it for the ones that actually have walked away and recognized it and gotten something out of it. So it's fascinating.
I guess that happens anytime you have a big group of people that has been formed in some kind of an artificial way, isn't it? Because, this is real world, and we're talking in the projector groups, we're talking about the relationships one-on-one, but in real life, there are big groups of people moving around, in places. And it's like, I'm just trying to bend my head around, like, how would it look if all the kids in a school were allowed to follow their inner authority, and then that 20, 30, 40% that just weren't into it, there was no judgment. It was just they could go and do whatever they love to do. And then you could just, like, how different the dynamic would be if kids could follow their, but then of course, how do you work with kids to support them in finding their inner authority? Like, how's that been for you with your girls, with the two kids you have? How old are they now?
The girls are 23 and 26, so they're not, little anymore. But I've always talked about, awareness and things like that. As soon as I found out about human design, of course, I looked them up, and I've been talking about it with them, because I see there's a little bit of that, overworking themselves thing. My one daughter is a 3-6, and my other daughter is, I think, a 1-4. So
that's interesting. Did you notice that all three of those profiles, you've got all of them covered? You see, you've got all the different lines between you, and they're all the unusual ones. Statistically, that is super, super, super unlikely. We're talking like less than 1 in a million.
That's actually very true, and so it's been very interesting that they're learning, they're listening.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing the parts like the 6 line, right, like the 3 and 6. The one, so she's always doing stuff, right? And she's done a lot of, she's had a lot of ups and downs. She's 26. And the other one is the 1-4. She's very methodical in certain things. She's got the root defined. So she's the one that puts pressure on me all the time, like a constant, never-ending pressure. Not to be late, not to, to do this or not to do this. So it's like a never-ending thing.
Emotional or splenic? Which way does it go?
They're both splenic.
They're both splenic. So she's got one of those channels going up the left side. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it's been interesting, but they're definitely learning. They're definitely listening. So I mean, I find the time when I can actually be invited to say something, and it's interesting that they kind of tell me, you're not invited right now to share. So it's just not. So this whole thing about having kids, I have to mention it because it's talked about in a lot of projector groups. And I have to say that obviously I didn't know my human design, and I've always wanted to have kids. I cannot imagine my life without it. I was a young mom, and I think maybe for projectors, it is the way to go, to be honest, because as you get older, there's a lot of conditioning when you're young as a projector, but you have a lot more energy. So, I was a young mom. I did a lot of things with my kids. I did so much. And then I was a single mom, and I worked 2 jobs, and I did, and I was very very active in their school, and I've given them a lot of time, and I've had in my own life, so I managed to do it all. And maybe that was a super generator mode, but I've had the energy to do it at that time. So I don't think there's a rule of like, projectors should not have children. Like when I hear this, it actually I feel it in my G center. I feel it's not the truth. I feel you cannot label everybody with the same paint everybody with the same brush. You cannot say that projectors should not have children. I mean, it's such a personal choice. And yes, I maybe was conditioned that as a human being, you have to have kids. But even looking back on my life now, it's such an amazing legacy, and it's such an amazing lesson and growth. And, my girls, I think, were meant to come into the world the way they did, and me being their mom, because it was sort of a little bit of trial and error growing up, but I have an amazing relationship with both of them. And don't get me wrong, we don't, it's not like it's perfect. We have our own struggles, and, there's things that show up, especially we're all projectors, so we all get exhausted sometimes, but.
Yeah. I mean, this is so interesting, isn't it? Because this really cuts to something that I care so deeply about, which is how do we use human design, right? And it's it's so easy to see how someone can read a quote from Ra where Ra says, you know, projectors are not here to pass on genetic material and have kids. And then, you know, and we don't know what the context of that was fully, like what lecture it was in and what and then it's like, well, you know, are we saying that, are we saying that you got it wrong? Oh, you're in your not self. Like, it just seems that a lot of people can use it to be judgmental of others. And I don't.
Yeah, and it's so limiting, I think. Like, I will tell you my story because this is a very important one. Because every time I see this and I see these discussions in different groups, I see that is, and I worry that somebody who is maybe thinking to have kids will just sort of take it to heart and will say, you know what, I'm not meant to be, or so. I wanted to have kids since I was young, and as a parent, you know, I look at people and, you know, I'm in my second marriage now. So I have stepchildren and I see my husband, you know, who is from a very different culture. I see, for example, he struggles with being, and I see, you know, the mother of my stepchildren, you know, how they both have struggled with their kids. And it's almost like they didn't have, and I don't mean it in a judgmental way, okay? It's just a fact that I've watched. They've had their own struggles and they've struggled because there's kind of this inability to parent, okay? And I don't mean it sounds so, not inability to parent, I guess, inability to maybe be a hands-on parent. And I've always known how to parent. I've never, you know, I've read books on it, but I've just had this intuitive thing. It's kind of like being a guide, right? You're not there to boss. And again, I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent, but I've been a hands-on parent. And I've been very confident in my abilities as a parent because I think it's something to do with guidance, right? It's kind of like you have this little human being. You're here to guide them, to not bump into things too much. And if they bump, you know, you sort of work with it and explain, you know, to learn from the bumps. So it's kind of like being a guide. So I've never had issues. Oh yeah, of course. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've had issues with them when they were teenagers, especially with my older one. But as sort of like the parent and how do you raise your kids? How do you bring them up? I've been very clear and very aligned on that one thing for sure in my life, my whole life since I've had children. I maybe was not even sure. Sorry?
Yes, you know, like when you talk about it, the energy is just a yes energy.
Yeah.
And,
so so when people are confused, I'm kind of like, where is this? Like, and I think that it's not a projector thing. I think it's just some people are just not sure in general, like how they can guide others because maybe they cannot guide themselves. So maybe that should be a thing. If you're not able, if you don't have the ability to guide yourself and to make good judgment, maybe that's not time for you to have kids, but it's not a projector thing necessarily.
I guess as a projector parent, that makes so much sense that you're going to be very much guiding. Whereas if you're a generator parent, you know, maybe you teach the kids by just doing your thing and they learn more by watching what you do. Or
the other side of because my sister is a manifesting generator, so she parents and I see how she parents. She's very and I mean she's a great mom, don't get me wrong, but it's a very different parenting. It's like, you know, my niece is 14 and she's like, do you go to the bathroom, honey? Are you okay, honey? Can I do? It's like this smothering parenting, right? Of like, you know, so you know, I was always of the opinion, you know, you bring your kids into this life. When you spoil them, that's a very egotistical, very selfish thing to do because you're not preparing them for real life.
Sure.
It's the worst thing you can do for your kids is spoil them because when they're real brats, nobody's going to want, you know, to be around them. So that's why I have a pet, right? I have a dog who I spoil immensely because it's not going to go to his head and I don't have to send him out into the world. I can just spoil and love him as much as I want. And I have a huge theory on this. It's like, you know, my time has come to be that, you know, person who has so much love to give, but not to spoil because, you know, you kind of want to, in a way, get carried away and spoil your kids. But again, you're not helping them.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the most interesting thing to me here is like, how do we start this from, you know, how do we design something? How do we work towards something that's the best it could possibly be for kids coming through, whether it's parenting, you know, bringing kids onto the planet, school, influencing kids or helping kids. I mean, it goes back to what your head teacher was telling you. Find your own truth, filter it through what's true for you. And, you know, even if we never heard anything to do with human design, you know, if none of us had ever come across human design, just this simple thing of saying, it's kind of sovereignty for me. It's like, go back to what's really true for you. And like you were saying earlier, start to take off some of those, you know, it's like, oh, I'm supposed to wear this because this will make my family happy. Or, you know, and then that translates in older life to, well, I'm supposed to do this because this is what society expects, or this is what my wife wants, or my husband thinks is the right thing. And it's like, how do we strip back to what's really true for the individual? And that, for me, is where human design can be amazing. And that's the question, you know, but it's the intention behind it, right?
I agree. And I think that the key is, like, if we're talking about parenting, for example, or teaching, is being very much aligned with your own truth. And how many people do we see walking around, you know, not necessarily even knowing what their truth is, right? Or thinking that the truth, having a truth, like, or thinking that the truth that they have is not even their truth, that they really go deep and understand it. Or start, you know, digging a little deeper where that came from, and so on. So I think if everybody did their work, I think we'd have a lot, you know, a lot more honest world, right? A lot more clear world.
I guess something I notice is when you then look at the regular world compared to the sort of the projector environments that, you know, we can hang out with other projectors. I actually realize that even when I sort of cringe at some of the things that I might see in a projector group, there may be a lot more awareness there than in, you know, the normal world, the regular world, the kind of, you know, the world out there, you know, the real world that they call it. But yeah, that's super interesting. 3-6, was your daughter a 3-6 or a 6-3?
I think it's a 3-6. I'm just going to quickly.
So that profile fascinates me deeply because I'm a 3-5. I'm a third line.
Okay.
And it's this thing about, is it okay to ask a little about your daughter here?
Of course. Yeah, no, sorry, she's a 6-3.
A 6-3. So in either way round, that they both lived the first 30 years or 28 years as a 3-3. So it's like, and I've actually started to really enjoy third line because the shadow of the third line is being a perfectionist and not making any mistakes.
Yeah,
trying to get it right.
I could see that. And the funny thing is, that before human design, I've been telling her this because I've been sort of her, you know, she would come to me when things are falling apart.
She's
except
lucky.
For a few times. Yeah, except for the few times that she
mess it up a bit more. It's okay.
Well, not like, you know, to be honest, it's kind of like, how much more can you mess this up? No, but I would just say to her, you know, okay, this did not work out. I'd be like, and she'd be devastated. Like I'm talking like she is completely broken. You know, example would be first heartbreak. It's just like, you know, life does not exist. I don't want to live anymore. Not making it to a graduate school that she really wanted to go to. And she'd come to me, and the heartbreak was a little harder, but the school, for example, it was like, no problem. What other schools do you want to go to? Just start looking and apply. And it all worked out magically. And all of a sudden she's like, yeah. So and now she loves it, and it's probably for the best anyway. So but it's a lot of trial and error. Like she's done so many different things. And I've just been telling her actually the other day that this is her thing that she's got to try. And she's like, but what do you mean? Like, so, because she so wants to achieve and she so wants to be successful. And she's super bright, so she can do it. But I said to her, just don't worry about it. Just try all these different things. Because she's got this channel of insight, I think, as well. This amazing, I think it's this, it's 5720 she's got. I think that's the channel of divine insight or something like that. So she's got, since she was very young, that's from the spleen over to the throat.
Yes.
She's got this, she's had this insight since she was really, really young.
So she's a classic projector, same as you, right? With no motors.
Yes. So she's a splenic, but no motors.
Yep, got it. Yeah, it's such a thing of like how do we? I just think that we're so far away from. It's so hard to even like, you know, we're so far away from the purity of how we could be as human beings. You know, it's such a. So the world is like it's like there's so much work for us all to do, and I'm really optimistic about how as projectors we can be part of that. You know, we can, you know, like you were saying earlier, really do the work ourselves to come back to us, so that we are then available to be guides to other people. And I kind of like, I feel like, you know, it can be tough being a projector, right? I mean, have you ever really struggled with not having energy, or you seem like,
a lot. I mean, I've lived up until I was about, I would say 40 years old. I've lived so just a few years ago, I've lived a life of just doing and constantly being busy. And it still kicks in from time to time, because it's kind of like, where's my worth, right? I don't have a will center, a heart center defined. So it's kind of like to prove your worth to others. I've realized that's been a big part for me. It's also this conditioning. So since we were very young, I remember my sister and I would sit on a couch for a second, and my mom would come into the room. I'd be like, it's like she had this thing with seeing us not doing anything, and God forbid would be resting for a second. It'd be like, okay, go do this, go do that, go do this. I need you to do this. And to this day, she does this. Like when she comes into, to my house and she's visiting, and she says, she's in the kitchen, and it's kind of like, pass me this, pass me. Right away, I have this is such a reminder of my childhood. So I'm like, Mom, I'm not here to be sort of the, kind of like, yeah, you're either cooking and doing this. I'm happy to bring a couple of things, but I'm not going to be an assistant who is told what to do. I'm just, I'm either going to do it myself or you do it, and I'll go sit down. So I just kind of like now I set the boundaries, because I just know how she is. But it's very interesting that this thing, as soon as I sit down, I see that with my sister though, as a manifesting generator. When she comes to visit, she lives in the States. I love her, but I get tired just from how she never relaxes, right? She's always either on the phone, or she's reading something, or she's doing something, or she's, so there's this, it just makes me really tired. And I've realized recently that that's why, because before I couldn't understand. But so I find that energy very, very difficult to take. So when they come and visit for a week, I am literally just drained. As much as I try to have my own time, and it's still a challenge. But I kind of feel, it's the conditioning partly that, I can't let my family down. I got to let them come and visit, but it's hard. And I know family is a big thing for projectors. People talk about how much struggle they have with family.
So as a self-projected projector, I've got a little idea of an experiment we could do that might be fun. Okay. So, because one of the interesting things about, it's a bit like the mental projector, that the mental projector has obviously everything below the throat totally open, well, not totally open, but undefined. And you as a self-projected projector, we know there's some variation in the upper centers, but all self-projected projectors have the G and the throat, and nothing defined below that G center. So, we've got there 5 open centers, including the 4 motors and the spleen. And what I thought might be interesting would be to kind of paint a picture of, just sort of tune into, what does it feel? Because you obviously experience times when you're totally in alignment, and then times where there's not self stuff. And of course, we're all human. So, but I'm just curious, like, how would it be? Could we paint a picture of like the absolute not self G projector and how they roll, and the pure, totally cleared, totally debugged G projector, self-projected projector, and how that is in life? Because I'm just curious about that. What are you up for it?
No, that's a good question. I think, and maybe Ron is here, so it'd be interesting if he resonates with some of this. Yeah. So, well, I think for me, the not self, we'll start there, because I think the aspire to state of being, because, you have to be honest, that's hard to be sort of fully in alignment, often, but it's definitely an aspired state. So I think the not self is constantly doing stuff, first of all, and trying to be somebody helpful for everybody, and trying to fix other people's stuff because you have solutions, and it's sort of filling the gaps for others all the time in whatever way, right? Oh, I'll help here. I'll be here. It's, being busy, doing stuff every day, having your calendar full. Feeling like you got to sort of you know, really occupy your space in this world and show proof that you're not here just breathing the air for nothing.
So can we break it down before you continue? Because I'm feeling the root, the sacral, and the will center there, like, you know, feeling the pressure to do something, to be free of the pressure.
Feeling the pressure to do something. Feeling like
to do. Like, you know, like you're saying, your daughter, or maybe when your mother's around, or there's this sort of pressure, you should be doing something. Like, you know, that could be a belief, isn't it? You should be doing something.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure a lot of projectors are going to see that one coming up. You should be doing something. Then there's like, you don't know when to stop because the sacral's open and you're taking all the other energies.
Yeah, and I also feel like, the energies. So I feel like if I'm around a lot of people who are buzzing, like I can actually take on that energy and sort of feel like I'm capable of doing so much more, right? So, and then all of a sudden, when I'm alone, I'm realizing how depleted I am and how not in that sort of state of alignment I'm in. So it's being around also large groups of people often, and making an effort to be there, because I find I get so affected by that, especially if it's not the right environment.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the frequency, doesn't it? If you're around a bunch of generators who are in a state of ecstasy because they're following their passion, they're doing work they love so much, that could be fun.
Well, I was at a retreat this past weekend where it was a group that was very, you know, aligned. There was a lot of amazing work going on, and we were doing this true soul work that was like just energizing and really going to the core. And it was interesting to be a part of that. There were some breakdowns and breakthroughs. So the breakdowns felt harsh. The breakthroughs felt great. So in that place, I felt very elated, where you sort of among people who are aligned, who are aware, who actually kind of know sort of that state of the higher being for themselves. So that can feel amazing, even though it still can be quite draining.
Right. Were you there in a role as a guide?
No, I was one of the students.
You were a participant in that.
Yes, but the interesting thing is, I was talking to somebody about human design who was one of the teachers. It was three teachers, three elders. They call them elders because they were like in their 70s, amazing women. And they know, two of them knew about, no, actually three of them know about human design. So I talked to one of them, and we were doing this exercise, and she came up to me and said, I'd be honored to do the exercise with you. She's a manifestor. And she invited me, like I'm talking, I felt very recognized because she was a teacher, like a very, you know, very aware human being, sort of living her light in the world. That was actually kind of as a projector, I truly saw how this works, right? We just had a conversation. I was sharing something from the heart, from my G center. I was very present, and I was just sharing with her. And I think kind of the impact of that was that, you know, half an hour later, she knew there was this exercise coming, and she came up to me and said, you know, I'd be honored to do this exercise with you. Would you? And she invited me the second time right before the exercise was happening to make sure that we were doing it together. So it was interesting how when you are present and you're in your energy without any agenda, you know, and my motivation is innocence. So I'm just supposed to be and be present without counting or waiting or having anything else, because then I'm in transference. And, you know, I've been trying to be in that state more, and trying, I know it's not the right word, but I am in that state more these days. It's still an effort, but it was amazing. And sorry, I digressed but I just felt like sharing that.
Super interesting. Yeah. Because it is really like, you know, because it's sort of like this thing of like, oh, we're projectors, we're not supposed to have energy. I think it's dangerous. I think it's really, you know, it's like, well, what's the evidence? You know, I think people can get lazy, and I feel it's essential to do the research and understanding that, as you know, it's like if we're the translator for the process of what's actually going on, that our perception can color things, and you know, so how can we, because you know, no one I've met so far is totally enlightened with human design, you know, like totally pure in all aspects. So we don't have a clear eye to see, but as you say, the more we can be clear in ourselves, the more we can be So tell me a little about your work as a guide.
Yes, and can I just go back to,
Please.
to the question, to the question of the not self and the self. So what I find is there are moments when I really, really get tired, and I do, my big thing is to walk the talk, right? To what I share with women that I work with, and to be in alignment, right? Because how can I, and what I also believe is that we most want to teach what we most need. We want to teach what we most need to learn as well. So as projectors, I think it's good to look at kind of like, what is it that I want to share with others? Because sometimes that's a message for yourself, right? For me. So for example, the self-love is a big one that shows up. The self-love, the self-awareness. So I try to live this. And there's times when I feel really exhausted, and I know that I've sort of, I have a lot of energy. I do energy work, though. I have to say that really, really helped me in my life. So the energy work, by that I mean the meditation, connecting, and really kind of feeling aware of the energy around me, but also understanding that you can get charged up with energy if you do the work. So to say that projectors are not supposed to have energy is not how a human being or a divine human being operates in this world. There's many ways that you can actually connect with the energy and get charged up if you believe in that. I don't want to get to a point where people think I'm delusional here, but there is, this awareness, right, of the universal energy that we can tap into. And that's the importance of, I think, the work that we each can do, right, to understand how we can live in this world and be sustainable, right, and sustain a life. So it's important to listen to yourself. But the self-love part, there's times when I am really tired and none of the energy, like, I know I'm just tired, right? So, and I've been really listening to myself, and I'm at a point in my life where I don't work full time, but I make my hours. So, but I've lived it before, and I would get exhausted to the point where I wouldn't be able to get up, right? So that's the burnout that projectors experience. So I think to a certain extent, it's very important to hear that, your body, and to hear what it's telling you. So when my body is telling me, like, and I'm talking, no matter how much energy or how much good food I eat, I'm exhausted. So I kind of, try to go to bed early, or I try to take a nap, or just lie down sometimes and close the door to not feel the noise, right? To not hear the noise and just be, right, for a moment. So those are the types of things that I find. Or if I'm in a room of people where I feel overwhelmed, right, like energetically, since I'm so open, I just go, I need to leave, and I go outside, or I go, I think that's important to hear yourself, like, sort of to tune in, right? And everybody would be different, what they find works for them. But for me, I've been a city girl for a big part of my life, and I've become very much a nature person. So even though I live in the city, I have a park, so I take my dog to the park, or I have a cat that I grab and I just pet him, right? I just pet my cat for a second, or I pet my dog, where I feel, as a touch, it's hugely grounding. So, or anything where I can ground myself, right? It's like barefoot on the floor, just and like, or rubbing, my palms together. I do qigong. Qigong is amazing work. All of that stuff is available online. We live in a world where so much is available today, right? So those are the types of things that work to get to that place, right? I'm not saying I got it all. I'm not saying I know the answers. I just know what works for me.
Yeah, totally. But isn't that the thing? Is like, it's such a trap to say, well, and this was that thing of the voice being shut down, of like, well, you're not perfect, so you shouldn't be speaking. It's like, whoa, hang on a minute. How do we get anywhere if we're not allowed to kind of? And that's one of the things I love about this VIP lounge that we're in, is that people are sharing about their experiences, and
yes,
the patterns and the clarity is never perfect, but it sort of emerges from the chaos. These patterns, and one pattern that, and we've got Ron on here, and actually, when I think about all of the self-projected projectors that I know, I actually think that every single one of them has some sensitivity to energy. And it's just obvious that there is this universal life force energy all around us that we can feel, and that can animate us. And, who even says, whether we access it through Qigong, or, you know, tantra techniques or whatever it might be, there is energy. And, you know, we don't just have to take energy from other people. There's source energy around. And for me, that doesn't sound at all crazy. That sounds like obvious. Like anyone who didn't, who wasn't open to that, I'd be like, well, maybe you just haven't felt it yet. You know, it's like, but this other thing that I've heard from a friend who's a self-projected projector is trying to be clear on, because you know, your authority is to talk it out.
Yeah.
We can all hear when you know, listening to you talking this hour and a bit, you know, we can hear when you it all comes out and it's juicy, and you can sort of hear when the energy is sort of up and down. So my friend is often wondering, like, okay, I feel I need to say this. Am I needing to say it because it's me as a guide, that I need to guide other people? Or am I saying it because it's what I need to hear myself? So what you said about teaching what we most need to learn, it really speaks to that. And I suspect this may be a conundrum, maybe even a lifetime conundrum for a lot of self-projected projectors of, like, you know, is this something I've been invited to share? Or is it that I need to speak this so I can figure out what's true for me? And I guess, I don't know, maybe it goes back to the invitation of, like, were you invited to guide that person? Or, you know, and it's never clear, is it? Like, it's never 100% black and white, you know, oh, now I'm here for myself, oh, now I'm here for the other person. It may be both or neither, you know. It's like,
yeah, it's interesting that a lot of experiences, though, like as a 5, though, we are kind of a reflection sometimes, right, to others. So and the others are I mean, just like in life, I think, in a way, what we see in others. So I think maybe that's not the self-projected part for sure, where I feel like sometimes it's the need to speak things and get clarity. Also writing, I find, is a big one. So sometimes, you know, mornings I try to write a little bit after a meditation, because I find that's when you're sort of in your purest state of being, and you're not distracted, you don't have other energies present. Or even if, you know, you don't sleep alone, you kind of take that time to just get clear on things that might come, and kind of get a little closer to yourself. So I find certain practices help to stay in alignment and to get a little more clarity on whether, you know, you're a guide for another or a guide for yourself. But something, you're right, it's very blurry. But what you said in one of your videos recently, I think is very, very, and I think I've already mentioned it earlier, because I think it's very important, is when we do the work and we become more in alignment, things become more clear. It's kind of like, and things show up. It's like the things that, the stuff that's talked about energetically, right? That invitation and the recognition, when we're doing our own thing and we're loving what we do and we're aligning to ourselves and we're not seeking it out there. Right. And I think for every human being, that's a big thing. But for projectors, that's the medicine, not the medicine, sorry, that's the truth. And it's so hard. It's so hard to trust. But once you start seeing the seeds of that, or that in it kind of showing up, and you've talked about it, Dunstan, in a few of your videos, it's just sort of doing this work, right? And just trusting that all of it is not for nothing, that it's there and it's all accumulating into an experience, or it's leading to some other thing, or you're doing it because you're enjoying it. It's that leads to more clarity, but to more opportunities, and to a different place in a way of more alignment with yourself, and having the right invitations, and being more clear on what invitations you want to take, and more clear on what you want to respond to, and how you want to guide others. And people come to you because I find, you know, I could be standing there, if I'm in my own sort of in the G, and I feel my truth. For the G center, like, it's the truth, right? It's that being very aligned with your truth, and being in that innocent motivation is a big one for me. So it's kind of aligned in my truth, not expecting anything from others, but just being. That's when I find the biggest magic happens.
It gets easier, right?
It gets easier, and things happen, like things happen. And as a fifth line, Raluca and I had a quick exchange on this, because I find that the opportunities come mostly for me in my life. I mean, I've been in a corporate world, I've been a self-employed person, I've been a real estate agent, you know, now I coach people. So I've lived different careers, but all the big opportunities in my life have been from people I didn't know.
Right, right, which is totally different to the fourth line, isn't it?
Yes.
The opportunities coming from out there somewhere. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
from the people I least expected from. When I'm aligned.
With the innocence as well. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, there's an opportunity coming from, or something coming from out there. Yeah, nice, super nice.
And Raluca, she's also innocence, right? Wow, that's yeah. Raluca is also innocent, so
yeah.
You can relate to that, right?
I can relate to so much of what you shared. Being a 5-2, motivation in a sense, working as a translator, traveling, growing up in a communist country. There's some great similarities. Yeah, so it's been very inspiring to listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I wanted to hear a little bit of your, I know this has been, we kind of went all over, but I'm so glad. Is there anything that, sorry, Dunstan, I don't mean to take over, but my structuring thing kicked in. I wanted
What's the question? You're invited to ask Raluca a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to see, is there any insights or anything you want to share from yourself? Because I do feel like it would be valuable, just right from, because we do have some similarities, like in the 5-2 and like you said, the innocence and having the history of growing up in a communist country. Is there any insights or anything that you want to share that?
I had plenty, but I also was being busy with taking notes. And I know that when I'm inspired, I tend to write a lot, and then I have trouble to brush it up.
Okay, one thing.
Yeah. So I don't know. One, the stuff that you shared about learning to listen to your body and to respect when you are tired. And to do stuff for yourself, like grounding, walking in nature. And I feel like I've been learning in the past years to do this more and more. And it feels great to hear you talk that you do the same things. I practice yoga, but I wanted to start Qigong for a while. So now I think you gave me inspiration to start that as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to share what I do. Like, I'll share a couple of videos that I watch just because I find it's very simple, but absolutely amazing. Just to, again, it's more about awareness, right? Mm-hmm. The practice of it that brings awareness of our energy and where we are, so that we can say, okay, I'm at this place, but you have a solution. Like, I can actually tap certain points in my body and feel more energized, right? Or feel more connected, feel more grounded. So I think for us projectors, it's such an important thing versus to say, oh, I don't feel any energy and I'm just, my day's shot. Forget about it. Like, I just can't do anything. Because I see a lot of these posts, unfortunately, and it makes me really, really sad to see how people kind of like are, and sometimes it's kind of their own, it's this victimhood. It's this, self-fulfilling prophecy. There's a lot of things in there, but I just want to say, the tools are there, right? And I know Dunstan talked about this, which was that brilliant when you were completely on fire, do you, and I'll do me, or something like that. It was just, I forgot, but there was so much in there, like the gold, right? And like, maybe we are, I love this, maybe we're flying cars, but we're trying to be the, trying to use the engine for the, it was good. It was so good. It was so inspiring. And it's so true, right? It's kind of like, don't try to be a buggy if you're not, like, if you're a flying car.
You are the vehicle you are, right? That's the blueprint of human design aspect of it, which is, it's so true. Yeah. And I think there's two things that are coming out of this. One is, I feel like for us as projectors, everyone says, oh, be in your body, it's like, but how, so that is, I feel, is a real powerful thing for us to explore ongoing. How do we really get into the body as projectors, as humans, and especially as people without a sacral, and especially as projectors, like with open centers, like how do we get into the body? And the other thing that's coming up here as well is like this thing of, when I don't have energy, there's something wrong. I should have energy. And I still struggle with that heaps, it's like, can I, like, of course, we love, I don't know about you guys, but I love it when I'm feeling energized. I can do stuff. I can get an invitation. I can guide someone. It feels great because ultimately I feel as projectors, we want to feel like maybe everyone wants to feel like we make a difference somehow. Like, you know, we want to see that we do something and it creates something in the world that we enjoy. And but I feel like this it ties back in with this inner work. How can we learn to be just as happy when we've got no energy? Maybe it's like more subtle, tiny little micro flows of energy. I think as projectors, because we don't have the sacral overpowering everything the whole time, we can be a lot more attuned to, like, you know, like you've got all the death gates, like 38, 39, 43. Like, what about, oh, my 38? Like I've got that gate there of, like, I think 38 is the fighter. You know, it's like wanting to fight a little bit. Or I've got this little thing on my 26, which Raluca has as well, the egoist. You know, what's the ego? I mean, you've got a lot of the same gates even. You know, what's my look at that. That's interesting. That 26 is doing it. So I guess it's about, and I'm going to try this the next time I feel low energy, to really actually forget about doing shit. What about actually just exploring inside the being and feeling like, you know, it doesn't get spoken about a lot because we're all about success and getting invited. But like, as you've shared, you know, in your journey, doing the inner work means the more clear we are in ourselves, the more we can be in service to others. And it's that thing of, like, you know, I'm seeing you, but actually it's in here where I'm, you know, if I'm in my body. So yeah, it's super. I just feel like we've got a lot of work to do, and I don't mean digging trenches or building houses.
No, but I think, you know, it's also the passions, right? Like, I talk about it a lot with my clients. I think, and you tell me if, as a projector, you know, and Raluca maybe can speak up a little bit as well about, you know, when we do what we love. And, like, for example, I love to dance. I love being in my body. You know, Raluca says she does yoga, maybe, you know, dancing or some kind of, you know, physical movement. You know, when you do what you love, or, you know, it's doing some art, or, you know, I love to sing. So at the workshop that I did this past weekend, they talked about sound, right? And I've really connected with that. So I'm going to explore working with sound, because being, you know, having a defined throat, I need that channel cleared. Like, I need to use my throat a lot for speaking, but also for making sound, I feel, and for being, for sing. And I love to sing, right? And I love being at a certain place where my voice gets to a place where I feel I'm really aligned. So when we do what we love, I feel we actually are a lot more energized, right? And then if we feel like we're not needed, we're not recognized, we're not in alignment, you know, we feel bitter, the energy actually drains from us. So let's not forget that it's not just us being projectors, but it's the emotions that we experience, or the feelings that we experience that bring us to an emotion, then bring us to the story sometimes, that can also cause all these feelings and the energy completely drained in us, right? And then we start kind of like building the stories and building the castles of those stories. And that can take us down, right? That can make us completely drained. So, you know, there's kind of two sides to it, you know, like, and I think you've talked about, remember you said in one of your videos, Dunstan, do what you like find what you love to do. And as a human being, like, a lot of people don't know what they even like, right? So let's all find something we love to do, and let's get energized, even if we spend 10, 15 minutes a day.
Right? The exhaustion as a projector, I think we've got a little bit of a time delay, but the exhaustion as a projector, I don't think it's just as simple as energy, no energy. There's physical exhaustion, which requires physical rest. And then there's also that feeling of, like, that you know, I referred to it as a spiritual exhaustion, like the soul is tired because the soul isn't doing things that the soul loves to do. And it's exactly what you're saying. So I feel like we're on the same page with those.
Absolutely. And then we shut down, right? We sometimes shut down that soul voice, right? And that's where, whether it's through singing, through dancing, or through doing something we love, you know, if it's like being athletic, right? Like you've been an athlete for, you know, a swimmer, you said, I think, right? You've done a lot of...
Yeah, that expression, that allowing the expression. And
yes,
there is something I really feel like as self-projected projectors, like, I feel like you you can really teach us about, there's something you have to teach us, which is about just being true to yourself. You know, being true to yourself. You know, it's like you say, it's the G connected to the throat, and the expression, the individuality of expression, you know, just being you, just doing you. And if there's one thing that anyone takes from this, I think that, you know, it takes us right back to at the start where you said your headmaster said, you know, that was his way of saying it, wasn't it? Filter it in your own way, filter it through you, do you, express you, be you. And I feel that's a really beautiful gift that you as self-projectors have for all of us. So that feels beautiful. I wanted to ask you, I wanted to dip into your incarnation cross because that's quite interesting. We talked about the masks at the start.
Yes,
I also just wanted to ask if there's anything on your chart that you would like to ask about. I mean, I've got it. I've been playing this morning. This is you.
Well, there's something. You said something like 26 something. There was something you mentioned about 26.
The egoist. Gate 26. Yeah. So gate
I didn't know that.
26 is this one down here pointing across at. Okay. It's from the will pointing across to the spleen. So let's pull that one up and do it straight from my body graph. Here you are. So you have gate 26 on your north node in the first line. And for anyone wondering how we know that, if you look down the column of numbers, let's pull your chart up. That might be a useful thing to do right now. If I can get this. Yeah, we're going to pull that up back to the meeting and let's share, because we haven't even pulled your chart up yet. So tell me if that's coming through.
Yes.
Can you see it okay? Great.
Yeah.
Now this is slightly more, it's an advanced chart, so that there's some extra numbers involved. But if you look at the right-hand chunk where it says personality, and one from the second from the left and the second from the top it's the squiggly N shape, which is the north node, 26.1. So it means you have the 26th gate in the first line. Now, if we look at gate 6, which is on the will center, it's black and red. So you also have it in the north node on your design side. So we've got that on both. Now I'm going to go into Jovian, and I've got the upgrade there, which says a little bit more, gives a little bit more information about that. So gate 26 is the taming power of the great, the gate of the egoist. And we looked this one up the other day because it's in Raluca's incarnation cross. And hers was all about minion, which I think also had the 45. But let's come back to you. 26, the taming power of the great, the gate of the egoist. First line, a bird in the hand.
Is better than something in the bush?
Yeah, that's the saying. The ability to enjoy the dreams engendered by accomplishment in order to avoid the delusion of unlikely potential. The ego, which transcends limitation through dreaming. Accomplishment as a license for foolhardy risk-taking. The refusal of the ego to be satisfied. That was in the little arrow pointing down. And you've got it in the north node in the third line, and it's influence. This is on your design side. The ability, once prepared, to gather support. Yeah, so it basically talks about the, you know, I forget the terminology, but there's the up arrow, which is the positive aspect, and then there's a negative aspect. So the up arrow is the ability to focus communal effort, the power of the ego to gather support, and then on the downside, the leadership, while gathering support, will underestimate potential challenges. The egoist unable to recognize the potential challenges in others. So that's that one particular gate that you have in black and red. Interestingly enough, I have the whole channel. So in our dynamic, it's what they call compromising, because it's like you've got one gate and I've got the whole channel. A bit like gate 13, where I have one gate and you have the whole channel. Would you like to know a little about your incarnation cross?
Absolutely. And I'm also interested what that means, compromising.
Yeah, let's talk about compromising first then. So, so you've got gate 26, and can you see gate 44 is undefined for you? Opposite.
Yep.
So gate 44 is on the spleen. So I have that complete channel. I have 2644. Now, the thing here is that when you have one gate, it's like you've got that one half of the channel, and I've got the whole channel. So this is it's the channel of surrender. It's a design, I think it's the design for influencing others in the tribe. And it's also about, it's also known as a sales channel. So you've got that the spleen connected to a motor there, spleen connected across to the will. So Gary Vaynerchuk has that one as well, out of interest. I don't know if you know Gary V, who's a well-known personality. Now, how does this compromising work? Well, what it means is that if we were working on a project together, your gate 26 might sort of want, especially with it being the egoist, might want to do it in a certain way. But in our working together, it's almost like, because I've got the whole channel, that dominates. The whole channel takes over from what it's like. The healthy way in the relationship is when you've got that in compromise, it's almost like you have to go, okay, that bit you do it your way. That's the way compromising works. Now, one that we have in compromising the other way around is if you look at your channel 3313, the prodigal, which goes from your G center up to your throat. So I have gate 13, which is the fellowship of man, the gate of the listener. It's also in your incarnation cross. So do you find people come and talk to you and tell you stuff when you didn't really ask them to? That people share things with you?
Absolutely. People tell me stories.
So we're fifth line. We've got this gate 13, right? So it's the gate of the listener. So we both have this capacity to have big ears, listen. Now you have the whole channel. You have the prodigal, the design of a witness. So if we're like, it happened a little bit in the conversation with Raluca. Did you notice how easy it was for you to step in and be the person? And this is nice for me. I was just like, okay, cool. Your channel dominates. Can you see that? When we invited Raluca into the conversation, it's like it was very, very natural for you to step in. Right. Here's the prodigal, the design of the witness. I'm here to witness you. Okay, Raluca, talk to us. And it was so funny because like I've got this channel, but it's compromised because you've got the whole. I've got the gate, sorry, and you've got the whole channel. So it's kind of like, yeah, I can listen, but you've got the whole thing. And I have this scenario with Raluca in another place in my body graph. We both have the gate of revolution, but she's got the channel. It's awareness, isn't it, Raluca? It's the channel of awareness. I think it was the 1949. Raluca has the whole channel.
Is the channel of
she's
sensitivity?
Muted just now. There we go. Thank you. Sensitivity. Yeah. So Raluca has this extra capacity where, I can go, right, we should do things like this. Let's have a revolution. Let's change this. I can make a lot of noise about it. And that's my sun gate. But when Raluca comes in, she has that more sensitivity. She has that, but she also has the sensitivity to where other people might be at. So it's kind of interesting because I kind of can sort of step back and take a bit of a back seat because Raluca has the capacity to tune into other people more deeply around the revolution, the principles that we're trying to bring in. So that's a little bit about compromising. It's still something I'm getting. But I'm starting to sort of see little hints of it. So if you pull up a chart and one person has the whole channel, the other person has one gate, you can see those compromises. And
I see.
Experiment with it. That's what I'm doing anyway.
And then the one where it completes the channel, that's when like it actually works
Well, right, so if one has
bridging gate.
Uh-huh.
And your single definition, so you don't have any bridge gates, because all of your centers, that you've got 3 centers. Anyone that ever has 3 centers, you can't be split definition with 3 centers. You need at least 4 centers. Because, you know, if you've got, I can't remember, I think Ron is split definition. I think Ron's got the top 2. He's got the head and the ajna, and then his ajna is not connected to his throat, and then he's got his throat connected to the G. So he's got a split definition. So he, from memory, I think he doesn't have any gates at all between his ajna and his throat. So he's got this split definition, which is looking to be connected up, so the whole thing connects. So for single definitions, you guys don't have to worry about how you get bridged. So we've got a comment there. Let's see, maybe that's Ron's sharing. No bridge gate. Right, so it is, of course, for you, what you will find, Yeugenia, is there can be attraction along gates where you have a half the gate and the other person has the other half.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, the attraction.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So, for example, I have gate 37, you have gate 40. This is between the emotional center and the will. And that's the channel of the deal. I think it's the channel of family. It's a tribal channel. So it's, and Pascal's saying she has the 44, you have the 26. So between you, you make that channel. I like to think of it as if the centers were islands, and then we're kind of trying to, the energy wants to flow, and it can flow along these bridges or tunnels. Now, if I've half a bridge, I'm constructing, you know, so I've got gate 37 and it's kind of doing its thing, but it's waiting for gate 40. You've got gate 40, and then when those two come together, there's that attraction, because it's like this gate wants to be used by having the other gate, and this one wants this one. They come together, then their energy can flow, and in our case, it defines another center, you know. So that's great. The attraction that happens along the 2 paths, and it's the what we call hanging gates, right? It's when there's like just a gate sort of waiting, like a hanging gate. It's there. Like someone said it's like a tentacle. It's sort of looking for that other.
Well, that's why maybe we're talking today, right? Because there's some kind of exactly. Just like boom. There's a connection. Well, there's a few, like the structuring channel is interesting. The 4323 is interesting, because don't you have that as well?
I do, and I've also got it in unconscious, so it's red for me as well.
So how does that show up for you, I wonder, as in unconscious, you know, because it's a freak or genius, right?
Yeah, let's talk about the 2343, and Pascal has that. I believe she has it in conscious. So for Pascal and I, it's in our incarnation cross. And it's actually in your incarnation cross as well.
Oh, really?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's on the unconscious side of your incarnation cross. Now, the first thing to say about this channel is that in the wheel of the mandala, they're opposite. So 23 and 43 are opposite. So if you have sun on one, you've got the earth on the other, and vice versa. If you have north node on one, you've got south node on the other, and vice versa. So whenever you have it in the sun or the earth, you get the whole, whenever you have one of those gates in sun or earth, or north node, south node, it completes the whole channel. So 2343 is formed in opposition. The only 2 other channels that have that are 3740 that we just talked about, and also the 2034, which is the pure manifesting generator channel from the throat down to the sacral directly. So they often, those channels form up quite often because they're in opposition, like we said. Now, it's in the individual circuitry, the 2343. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, it means that the energy comes in pulses, and it's not like an always on kind of channel. The energy just comes in those bursts. And this channel is also known as the pure projector channel. And because you and I have it unconsciously, it's like we have that capacity, but it may not always be apparently obvious. For me, how I feel it as structuring is, I always want to bring order to situations. If I see chaos, I'm okay in chaos, but I can see how things could be done better, or I could see how we could you know, if you're decluttering and you put like with like, you know, if there's a box that's got clothes and kitchen appliances and old photos, then you go, right, the photos go there, the kitchen appliances go there, waiting for other kitchen appliances, and the pictures go in, you know, it's structuring, it's bringing order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's now, why is it called the freak to genius? Because it's all about timing. So right now you've asked me, you've invited me to share about it. And so it's like, it's interesting. It's like, yeah. So if I say something, it's much more likely that you'll be like, ah, yeah, that's insightful. That's the genius part. Whereas if I just go up to someone in the street and start telling them all about the freak to genius channel, they'll be like, what are you on about? You're a bit weird. It's like that uninvited projector type thing.
Yep. Yep.
So it's all about timing. And you could be saying the same thing to the same person, but it wasn't the right timing. One moment you're a genius, the next you're a freak. You're like, and not a good freak, you know, not that kind of freak. You know? So what else to say about 2343? Yeah, I mean, that's it's a very good companion channel for the 2034. It's very good to guide the pure manifesting generator when they're in.
Interesting.
Yeah. Incarnation cross.
Yes.
How's that so far?
That's very interesting.
Does that resonate?
Absolutely. Oh, the timing thing is so interesting. I mean, how many times in my life have I shared something and they thought I was a freak, or they would just not listen, but then use what I said, my insight, as their own, which is very frustrating. I don't know if you've, I mean, I'm sure, you know, I don't, you know, I'm not living your life, but I'm sure you've experienced that too. And that's like, I'm going to kill you. Like, I'm just like, this is not, it's not yours. It's not.
This is worth saying again. We had this in a chat one time. It's totally worth saying again. Let's just pop off the, let's just turn off that screen share. It is so worth talking about, because it's the thing of being a, I can't even work out how to do it. My computer does this thing. It's this thing of like, here we are, stop share, let's come back. So many people say, yes, me too, I had that experience, right? So the experience is, you can see really clearly what needs to happen, right? This person's struggling away with some problem, and you can just see how easy it could be for them, but you didn't get an invitation.
Yep.
And you said, oh, you should do this and this and this. Now, what happened was, they heard you, but they didn't, but they felt penetrated by your aura without invitation. So they responded to that by either like, they probably just turned their back and walked off in the other direction, or they might have said, leave me alone, or they might have said, whatever they did, they were like, stop penetrating me. That's the energetics, is don't penetrate me. I don't want to be penetrated right now. It didn't ask for your input. However, it went in. They may not even have noticed that it went in. Then they've gone off there and they've started to use it, and they'll probably be telling everyone else about how great it was. Oh, I figured out this new way to do this thing. And it's not because they're being an asshole. It's just because they energetically. So of course we then feel bitter because we weren't valued. We feel frustrated because they've got the value from it. Not only were we not valued, we were pushed away. And
yes,
that is, you know, I know you've had that same experience, I can tell.
Yeah, and well, and Pascal, I think, just commented something, you know, even sometimes when they don't, you know, I find you can just suggest an idea and they reject it. And all of a sudden, like a day later, like I see that with my husband a lot, like it's rejected, and all of a sudden, or it's kind of like ignored, and all of 2 or 3 days later, it's like his idea. And I know he's not doing it on purpose. Like, he's pretty brilliant on his own. He doesn't need my brilliance, but it just shows up that way, which is kind of, it used to be bizarre. Now I just laugh because it's the mechanics of it. But back in the day, I used to think, like, how could you do this? Like, I suggested that 2 or 3 days ago. So it's partly what you're talking about, Dunstan, you know, it's just taking in that energy.
Also, it's the energetics of it rather than just the, you know, logically it's problem solution type stuff. It's very simple, but energetically and emotionally, it's a whole nother thing. And I think also this is a trick for us in order for us to value ourselves as projectors, is to actually not give all the good stuff away too easily. I agree.
And you know, it's interesting that as a projector, I've been
playing with it a lot. So I've been actually sometimes keeping quiet and just watching the energy in the room. And it's so interesting when you keep quiet and it's sort of the dynamics, people turn to you and they want to know what you're thinking. And that's when it's your time to shine. Truly, it's like they just rolled out the stage for you.
They're
and
like,
you can step on. Yeah. And you're kind of like, wow, the red carpet is there. I can step on it. And it's kind of like, you know, and I think when you see that and you feel that energy, it's amazing because you kind of, you know, almost like take your time and step on it. And all the eyes will be on you, no matter how quickly or how slowly you want to share this information. It's almost fascinating. Not almost, it is fascinating.
It? Yes, it comes back to timing. And also that fifth line being very charismatic at the right time, in the right situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear a little more about the cross.
Sure. So you have two other gates in your incarnation cross. You have gate 7 is your sun gate. It's called the army, and it's the gate of the self in interaction. Gate 13, also on the G center, is the fellowship of man, which is the gate of the listener that we talked about.
Yep.
So here's an interpretation on your left angle cross of masks, number 2. Your cross is expected to lead when there is a dire need for someone to step forward and provide a solution. With this energy, there will be an expectation for you to come through and save the day. Preparation is key for you as the expectations are large. Make sure you're ready for the task at hand or turn it down, as the consequences of failure may be great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I guess it comes back to the correct invitation.
Yeah.
So very powerful stuff though, isn't it? You're like, I think it's one of those channels that Ra talked about. I can't remember which one it is, but it was one of those from the G to the throat. It may even be the one on the 7, which is all about how they used to have generals that in times of crisis, they would call upon who they'd say, right, you're in charge during this period of crisis, mm-hmm. like an emergency state, you lead us, but then when the crisis is over, give it back.
Yeah, yeah. So what I've been told with that cross, it's when you do the work, like even lead a workshop, which, you know, I do, or, you know, my new thing is I'm going to be leading retreats, is when you do the teaching at the end, do not stay around for the festivities and the social part, but leave, do your work and leave, because as soon as you stay, it's a different type of interaction, and that could be disappointing, or that could be something in there that where, you know, you fall from grace a little bit, because you kind of step in to do the work, but don't sort of mix with the troops. That's right. Kind of how, right. Which is very interesting, because I do find that there's been times in my life where I kind of felt the energy of like, you know what, this is complete, I should go. But then, you know, people are like, oh, come, you know, let's go for drinks, you know, we're all, and sort of you're there and you kind of feel like you're no longer as valued as you were half an hour ago, because now people can sort of, you know, elbow you and like have a drink. Like, I don't know, there's something about the energy there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is where it can be, you know, leadership can be lonely, you know, eagles fly alone. But to be a true leader, like, you know, you're off there preparing for the next time you need to be called out to lead. You're not interested, you know, that's, it's just a different mentality. You're not there to be chummy, friendly with people. You know, it's like, it makes total sense to me.
Yeah. And it's because, like, you know, you're sort of in a different place. Right. And so I've kind of like been picking up on that energy, especially, you know, so, you know, for example, even as a real estate agent, you know, I would work with my clients, and I would socialize with them, like, you know, I would take them for coffee and then I would be gone, like, or I would come in and sort of like celebrate, and I feel like it's not my place. I have friends who are, you know, let's say they were real estate agents, and they socialize with their clients all the time. They're friends, they do all kinds of things. I never felt it was appropriate for me. I've always felt like,
when you talk about your friend, it feels like more that enveloping energy of like, no, we're all friends, we're all kind of.
Yes, it's the generator for sure.
The generator aura. Yeah. I don't know if this is just on those gates, but it does very much feel like it's a projector thing of yeah, go off. You're not there to hang around. I like it. It's very clear what you shared. It's really powerful.
And I think maybe for a lot of us, we need to be clear of that energy. It's almost like, sometimes you just want to sort of, it feels so good and you want to continue whatever is going on, but you can ruin it with staying too long, right? It's kind of, be English, just, we say, we have this joke that, English people, they leave without saying goodbye, right?
Really?
So be English, just sort of like, without, it's not a bad thing. It's just, sometimes it's good to leave like that versus people who say bye and never leave, those guests.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going. And then they're at the door for an hour.
See you soon. Hang on.
Oh, but I wanted to share this and I wanted to share this, and they never leave, those guests, right? Or that are at the door for 3 hours. And the ones that say bye or just disappear, right? Sometimes they're better guests because they just like, that energy, it's something in that interaction closed off, you're done, and maybe sticking around is going to ruin it, right? And I've experienced that in life, and it's actually not great because you ruined the rest of it that was good.
Yeah, I guess you could ask a question. You could say, I could say to you, you obviously know this already, but Yeugenia, you're here to be an amazing leader and to step in and lead and then go off and prepare yourself to lead the next time. And you have a choice. Your choice is, do you, A, live a life that is 100% about that, which is true to you, which is like, okay, I've finished, my job is to lead, to direct, whatever, to be a guide. I'm done guiding. I'm off to go and get back in my aura and prepare for the next time, go and wait for my invitation for the next time I'm called out to be a guide. Or do you want to have that companionship, have that feeling like you're connected with other people, feel like you're a sociable person, feel like, oh, well, they're inviting me to go for a drink. It's an invitation, I should go and have a drink with them. And I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but I guess what's formulating here, this structuring freak to genius thing is you can't have both, and this, I think, is one of the hallmarks of greatness in life, is a hallmark of excellence in life. You can't have everything,
No.
You can't be a great and powerful, respected leader and be chummy with everyone the whole time. It just doesn't work. So it's not easy.
No, and I think the projected stuff, right? It's kind of like people, when you're there with the people, right, and they're projecting onto you. I think, what I wanted to say, the fifth line, being that person that is mostly recognized by the strangers in your life, right? That's where it's also, for me personally, I realized that when I have that closeness with somebody and I built that friendship, those people don't usually recognize my talents and my skills. So it's kind of like you socialize with one group, at least that's in my, and you work with another, right? Because the two somehow, and I don't know if Luca can relate to this, but the two somehow don't mix for me. And it's a combination of that general, but it's also, I think, the fifth line where I have the most impact on the people that I don't know well, or even like complete strangers. They seem to be a lot more receptive.
It's like you dull your edge of your steel. You dull the edge by the social interaction. It's like there's different groups.
Yeah, and it's it's a combination of things. I don't know if it's, but it could be, that cross could be in there as well. It's like they're seeing me in my everyday life, and that's probably what dulls the edge for them. Not that there's something to hide in my everyday life, but I think that makes me a little more trivial. That makes me a little kind of like everybody else. So why does she have something more important to say, or something that I need to listen to? But when you come in as a general for the strangers that I meet, or the people that sort of cross my path, that feel like I have something within me where I have the capacity to lead them, they don't know my everyday life, and that's where I'm sort of, I have that knowledge for them, and I kind of, I guess, look like that general, right? They don't see the general without the uniform.
When you want a general, you don't go down the pub and see who's hanging out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
You don't go, oh yeah, well, who wants to be general for this week? My friends. It's, yeah. You're going to go, right, oh, we need a real warrior, we need a general, or I don't know, we need the right person to fix this job. Where do we find them? You know,
Yeah.
like they're probably not going to be just hanging out on Facebook. It's such a powerful thing you're saying.
Yeah, you have to be that general. And the other thing I think with that, at least that's what I feel, and it's a combination, you know, integrity is a big one for me, and being in alignment. So that means sort of being that general in other parts of your life as well. Maybe not necessarily wearing the uniform, you know, but being that general, sort of having those skills and using that in your life too, and holding yourself up to that standard in everything. Because I think as a general, you know, and I compare it to some of the Russian generals who are like, you know, General Suvorov, who was, you know, who won so many battles and was a very, you know, an amazing citizen, right? He was so loyal to his country, and he was a genius, but he was that in his life too, right? And kind of who he showed up to be. And then we see examples of a general being kind of the face of a general, but not living it.
Yeah,
in their everyday life.
A big insight with this, because of how I show up in the VIP lounge, because I put a lot of energy in, and I like to try and help people, but I also feel there's something in that of actually, it probably served me and everyone else better if I was more like, you know, here's someone you call out if you really want some help. You know, if you really want someone to guide you, you go find someone to guide you. You know, it's a very interesting thing in a group of projectors where we're all so keen to be projectors and guide each other at varying different qualities of insight, or just sharing experiences.
Yes.
I mean, maybe sharing experiences is appropriate for fourth lines, maybe, you know, to be more sociable. But yeah, I feel like I'd like to be the guy that they go, oh, you know, what's that film where they call Mr. Wolf, or it's a Tarantino film or something where some shit happens and they're like, oh, you need to call that guy. You know, he's the one you got to call to help you out with this.
Yeah.
And he's not the guy down the pub hanging out. You know, he's someone you call when you need them. So yeah, interesting, real interesting.
Yeah, it's you know, when I read Lady Gaga's profile, they said that she is somebody who, you know, when she performs, because she's, I think, a 5'2", like she's got one of these lines. I think she's got a 5, and maybe she's got a 2. Anyways, but there's something about that where you don't every day, you don't sort of, you know, when I do my live book, like Facebook lives, I do it every week. I don't do it every day, even though I have a lot to share, because there's something about being sort of not that easy to get. I don't know, like not hard to get, but just sort of being available from time to time, but not being always available. And I don't know if that's the 5th line or the hermit, which one it is that it seems to be the, you know, but that's what and I find that that's kind of a thing where you make yourself sort of, you share all the time. It kind of becomes like not a big deal. So it's really like that timing, and I guess valuing who you are, and really only sharing when it's truly the right invitation, right? Because with certain people, we might not want to even share, right? Even if we're invited.
Ron has said that it's in Pulp Fiction, and it's the wolf, apparently. So that's the guy they call out to.
Yeah, I love that movie.
So yes, beautiful. Well, I have a lot of food for thought here. It's been fascinating, so interesting to hear about your adventures growing up, and you know, being one of the first people to come from to bridge that gap, that big divide of East and West that used to be there, and maybe is still there. But you were, you know, involved in that time in our history. Yeah, always really interesting to hear you speak. And yeah, I feel we're at the enough's enough time. Hey, how are you doing?
Thank you. Yes, I feel great. I just wanted to say thank you and recognize you, because the work that you're doing, I think, first of all, you know, I haven't watched all of the videos because it's, you know, it's a lot of time out of my day, but I find that the ones that I've watched, and I will watch more, sorry, my cat is coming across. It's fascinating because it's such an amazing idea, first of all, to be able to hear everybody's experience and to see what somebody's life is through their eyes. And there's so much we can all relate to. So I think what you're doing here and in your videos that you share, I find each one of them has a seed and food for thought.
sometimes they could be right between your eyes, but very honest. And if somebody's open to learning, I think there's so much there. And if they want to be offended, they're welcome to as well, right? But excuse me, but
Thank
there's
you,
so much to
Yeugenia.
learn.
Yeah, thank you. And it's, you know, it's really affirming.
Amazing work.
It's great. And it's, you know, I'm at that stage personally with this where it's just a case of, you know, it's like when someone becomes very successful and they've got loads of people, it's kind of, you rewind back and they've crossed the desert. You know, they had an idea, they started and they kept going. And along the desert, there's these little oases where someone, you get a little bit of recognition and someone sees you and you get these connections and you're like, yeah, I'm going in the right direction. And who knows where the end of the desert is, you know, but you just keep going. And by the time it's, you know, then being well known and having loads of followers has its own challenges, right? So it's fine. So I'm just enjoying it while I can. And I feel really blessed to have an audience and have, you know, because I'm the same. Like when I'm called out, I can be really insightful. If I'm doing small talk in the pub, people look at me and they're like, oh, he doesn't seem to be having much fun. You know, it's kind of like, it's not my space to shine. I'm not good at it.
No, but you're very good with your videos, what you do here. Because every video, honestly, as much as it might come across to some that, you know, you're just talking, there's so much insight there. And there's actually, you know, that channel of structuring is working, because for me, at least how I'm hearing it, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of structure. Even what you were sharing today, there was a lot said about, you know, different things that you've mentioned in your experience of dealing with others and the energy and being tired, but some of the insights from there were very valuable. So please continue doing this work. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I mean, I know you've got a lot of followers already, so keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for Luca as well, and thank you guys for being here.
High five to the team. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Alrighty. Much love, everybody, and everyone watching live. Thank you for being on the call, and for those watching on the recording, love to hear comments and feedback, and we'll see you next time. Ciao, guys.
Thank you.